Where your treasure is, there will your heart be also. God has hidden unlimited treasures in His Word. Every time we open it, we can discover a new treasure, or admire an old one. What will we find today? Let's dig in. Here's Carla Early with Treasure Hunt in the Word.
As we've talked about in the past few weeks, Jesus was a pretty radical guy. Throughout the Gospels, he's catching people off guard by things he says and does, or even by things he doesn't do. Sometimes you can almost hear the crowd gasp in surprise, or the Pharisees murmur, or the disciples sputter. They don't know quite what to make of him. Often they're speechless, which is when the King James Version says they marveled. This caused his disciples to follow him, crowds to flock to him, and the religious leaders to despise him and want him dead. The first time we see this in the Gospels, it's at the end of the Sermon on the Mount. It says, "And so it was, when Jesus had ended these sayings, that the people were astonished at his teaching, for he taught them as one having authority, and not like the scribes." So many times Jesus' teachings left people in awe, just sitting there saying, wow. It was so countercultural, so revolutionary, and sometimes pretty illogical. Yet he taught with authority. It seemed like he got every word straight from God, not like other teachers who quoted other people and didn't teach with God's authority. This guy was different. He was radical, and they wanted to hear more. Let's look at a few things he said in the Sermon on the Mount. First off, he taught that people who are weak in the world's eyes will be blessed. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are those who mourn. Blessed are the peacemakers. Blessed are those who are persecuted. How is that even possible? A little later, he dumps a big shocker on them. He says, "Unless your righteousness exceeds the righteousness of the scribes and Pharisees, you will by no means enter the kingdom of heaven." The scribes and Pharisees were the ones who kept every little point of the law. If they, who were as close to perfect as their society could get, weren't even going to be in the kingdom, how could any of the rest of them? As Jesus fleshed this out, he showed them that God was more interested in their hearts than in their perfect law-keeping. Yes, murder is bad, but anger is in the same category. Adultery is bad, but so is lust. He keeps saying, "You have heard it said, but I tell you," as if he was the final authority. Turn the other cheek, go the second mile, love your enemies, keep your charitable deeds, prayer, and fasting secret. Money shouldn't be your goal. God's kingdom should be. All these things would have shocked the first century listeners. They shock us today if we're honest about it. They're still countercultural. Our culture tells us to live for ourselves. Might makes right. Stand up for yourself. Do what you want to do. Divorce and adultery are normal. Money and material things are the goal in life. Jesus says, all of this is like building a house on sand. None of it will last. He calls us to a higher plane. He doesn't just call us to moral living because the Pharisees had that down pat and he called them hypocrites. He calls us to a complete heart change, a heart focused on loving God and loving people. He calls us to live a life seeking God's kingdom as our first priority, focusing not on what is seen, but on what is unseen. Talk about radical. And in living like that, we should see the same response to our lives as Jesus had to his. We should draw people like bees to honey as they realize that we have something that they're missing. Of course, others will either think we're crazy or hate us, like some people hated Jesus. Our lives, in contrast to theirs, will make them angry and even more self-righteous. One way or the other, people will be astonished. They'll marvel, not just at us, but at the God whom we serve. Are people amazed at the way you live? How could you live a more radical life, seeking God's kingdom first?
You can contact us at treasurehuntintheword@gmail.com. Also, if you'd like to share a treasure God has given you by doing an episode, please contact us. You can listen to other episodes on our website, which you'll find in the description below. Thanks for listening, and remember, where your treasure is, there will your heart be also.